Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating and misunderstood figures in modern geopolitics, Kim Jong Un. For years, he was dismissed by the world as a spoiled, overweight dictator with a bad haircut and a dangerous obsession with nuclear weapons. But somewhere between the jokes and the missile launches, Kim managed to pull off something extraordinary. He turned one of the poorest and most isolated countries on Earth into a strategic player that even world powers can't afford to ignore. How did he do it? How did a man mocked as Rocket Man by Donald Trump become someone who now walks side by side with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, and whose soldiers are reportedly fighting and dying on the front lines of the war in Ukraine? Let's unpack the story of how Kim Jong Un went from a political shadow to a central figure in the global chess game, and what that means for the future of Asia and the world. When Kim Jong-il died suddenly in December 2011, North Korea was thrown into uncertainty. His son Kim Jong-un, barely 27 or 28 at the time, was quickly elevated to the highest position of power. Unlike his father, who had spent decades preparing for the role, Kim had very little public experience. He had studied in Switzerland under a pseudonym, was largely unknown inside his own country, and had no real political or military background. Most experts outside North Korea predicted the regime wouldn't last. Analysts called him too young, too inexperienced, too dependent on the old guard. Many thought a power struggle among generals and party elites would bring him down within months. They were wrong. In less than 2 years, Kim consolidated power with ruthless efficiency. He purged potential rivals, including his own uncle, Jang Song-thaek, and tightened control over every level of the state. Through a combination of fear, propaganda, and strategic rewards, he made sure that the military, the ruling Workers' Party, and the intelligence services all served one master: him. This early consolidation phase showed something the world hadn't expected. Kim wasn't just a puppet of the old regime. He was smart, cold, and calculated. In his early years in power, Kim seemed to understand that pure repression wouldn't be enough. North Korea's economy was crumbling. Famine and corruption were widespread. So he experimented, just a little, with controlled reform. Factories were allowed limited autonomy. Some agricultural collectives were given flexibility to sell surplus crops. Kim even flirted with limited foreign investment and tourism projects, inspired by what China had done in the 1980s. Culturally, too, he loosened things, at least for a moment. Western pop music and Disney cartoons appeared at public events. He even allowed a girl group dressed in Western-style outfits to perform in Pyongyang. For a brief time, some foreign observers thought North Korea might be inching toward the kind of economic opening that transformed China and Vietnam. But Kim quickly realized that reform carried risks. Openness meant exposure. Exposure meant questions. Questions about inequality, corruption, and why the leadership lived in luxury while ordinary people starved. To Kim, that kind of thinking was far more dangerous than poverty itself. So he reversed course. The experiment ended, borders tightened again, censorship intensified. By the mid-2010s, North Korea had fully returned to its authoritarian comfort zone, and Kim had a new plan for legitimacy. Kim's father and grandfather both saw nuclear weapons as a deterrent, a way to prevent regime change. Kim Jong-un took that idea and made it the cornerstone of his rule. He called them his treasured sword. For Kim, nuclear weapons were not just about national defense. They were about regime survival and domestic power. Every test, every missile launch, every defiant speech against the United States served two purposes: to strengthen his bargaining position abroad and to remind his people at home that their leader was powerful enough to stand up to the world's superpowers. Between 2013 And 2017, North Korea conducted a series of nuclear and ballistic missile tests that shocked the international community. The more the world condemned him, the more his people were told that he was the only one protecting them from invasion. It worked. Kim's grip on the country tightened. He built a personality cult that combined his grandfather's revolutionary image with a modern, almost militaristic aesthetic. State media portrayed him as both a caring father figure and a fearless commander, and the nuclear program became his ultimate political shield. In 2018, Kim did something no North Korean leader had ever done before. He stepped onto the world stage. That year, the world watched as Kim met with South Korean President Moon Jae-in at the demilitarized zone, walked across the border, and later shook hands with Donald Trump in Singapore. For the first time, North Korea seemed to be open to dialogue. Those moments were historic and meticulously choreographed. Kim looked confident, even charismatic. He smiled, joked, and presented himself as a leader of equal stature to the U.S. president. Trump called him a talented man and even said they fell in love, though of course, that relationship quickly soured. By the time they met again in Hanoi in 2019, it was clear the talks were going nowhere. Kim wanted a full lifting of sanctions in exchange for limited denuclearization. Trump walked away. For Kim, it was a harsh lesson. Nuclear weapons gave him attention, but not leverage, at least not yet. After the failure of the Trump summits, Kim shifted strategy again. Instead of chasing deals with Washington, he turned to Moscow and Beijing. The timing was perfect. By 2022, Russia had invaded Ukraine and was becoming increasingly isolated from the West. That's when Kim saw his chance. North Korea officially recognized the so-called People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk, the Russian-occupied territories in eastern Ukraine. This was a bold diplomatic move that immediately aligned Pyongyang with Moscow. In June 2024, Vladimir Putin visited North Korea for the first time in over 2 decades. The two countries signed a comprehensive strategic partnership treaty, a deal that, according to reports, included military cooperation. Soon after, reports began emerging that North Korean soldiers and munitions were being sent to support Russian forces in Ukraine. Some estimates suggest over 10,000 North Korean troops have participated, with thousands killed or wounded. For Russia, desperate for manpower and ammunition, the deal made sense. For Kim, it was a geopolitical goldmine. He gained recognition, leverage, and access to Russian technology, possibly even missile or satellite expertise. Most importantly, he proved that he could make himself useful to a global power. Kim had transformed North Korea from an isolated pariah into a partner of convenience for both Russia and China. When Kim appeared on the Tiananmen Square balcony, alongside Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, the image sent shockwaves through Western capitals. It was the symbolic birth of what some have called the authoritarian alliance, a loose, pragmatic partnership among regimes that share a common enemy, the US-led world order. But behind the symbolism, reality is more complicated. China needs North Korea as a buffer zone against US allies like South Korea and Japan. Russia needs North Korea's weapons and manpower, and Kim needs both powers to survive international isolation. Each side is using the other, and Kim knows it. He's not content being anyone's junior partner. He's leveraging China and Russia to enhance his own independence. Every time he meets Putin or Xi, North Korean propaganda broadcasts the images nonstop, proof to his people that their country is not weak but respected. It's a delicate balancing act. China worries about North Korea's growing nuclear arsenal, but can't risk a regime collapse that might send millions of refugees across the border. Russia welcomes Pyongyang's help, but fears an overly strong Kim could complicate future diplomacy. And Kim? He's happy to play both sides, for now. In September 2022, North Korea officially declared itself a nuclear weapons state, irreversible by law. Kim announced that his country would never give up its nuclear arsenal under any circumstances. This effectively killed any hope of returning to denuclearization talks. To Kim, nuclear weapons are no longer a bargaining chip. They're part of his national identity, his personal legitimacy, and his family's legacy. He knows that as long as North Korea has nukes, regime change is off the table. That belief gives him a level of confidence no North Korean leader has ever had. When he said he'd be willing to meet Donald Trump again, but not to discuss giving up nuclear weapons, it wasn't arrogance, it was strategy. He's signaling to the world, we're past that point. For decades, the official North Korean narrative spoke of peaceful reunification, but that language has quietly disappeared. Under Kim Jong Un, North Korea now openly defines South Korea as a permanent enemy state. The idea of unity has been replaced by the rhetoric of confrontation. Relations between the two Koreas are at their lowest point in decades. Communication lines have been cut. Missile tests near the border have become routine. Pyongyang now treats Seoul less as a brotherly rival and more as a proxy of the United States. This shift reflects not only Kim's military strategy, but also his worldview. Survival through strength, not compromise. Now let's talk about something that fascinates many observers, the future of the Kim dynasty. Kim Jong Un is still young, but his health has often been the subject of rumors. And lately, we've seen a new face by his side, his daughter, Kim Joo-ae. She's been photographed at major military events, inspecting missiles, sitting beside her father at parades. An unusually public role for a child in North Korea's ultra-secretive ruling family. Is she being groomed as a successor? Possibly. In a country where leadership is justified by bloodline, lineage is everything. The Kim family's divine aura, the Paektu bloodline, as propaganda calls it, is the core of their legitimacy. Whether or not Joo-ae ultimately takes power, her presence serves a purpose. It reminds North Koreans that their country's future is inseparable from the Kim family's destiny. So where does this leave us? Kim Jong Un has defied expectations. He's survived political isolation, economic collapse, international sanctions, and even pandemic lockdowns, all while strengthening his control at home and expanding his relevance abroad. He's turned North Korea from a global punchline into a geopolitical irritant that no one can ignore. But his success comes with risks. By aligning with Russia and deepening ties with China, Kim is betting on a future where the world becomes increasingly divided, where authoritarian regimes stand together against the West. If that world materializes, North Korea could find itself more powerful than ever. If it doesn't, Kim may discover that he's built his kingdom on sand. One thing is certain, Kim Jong Un has transformed the rules of the game. When I look at Kim's journey, from an underestimated young ruler mocked for his haircut to a calculating strategist sitting next to world leaders, I can't help but think he's playing a much longer, more dangerous game than most realize. He's not just trying to survive. He's trying to rewrite North Korea's place in the world order. So what do you think? Is Kim Jong Un a cunning survivor, exploiting global rivalries to his advantage? Or just another dictator riding a dangerous wave that could crash at any moment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive interesting, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next analysis on global power shifts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.